You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program, a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew. We are here with Ali House, the author of The Sixth Elemental, as well as many short stories, including 2 in the upcoming anthology Dystopia from the Raw. Her second novel, The Fifth Queen, debuts in March 2019. How are you today, Ali?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Ali is a playwright currently residing in Nova Scotia, Canada. She is originally from Newfoundland, though. Is that correct?
That is correct. Deer Lake.
Deer Lake, Newfoundland. I don't think we've ever had anyone from Deer Lake on the show before, but I understand they have like a massive writing community out there.
Oh, not when I lived there.
No?
Nope. Not.
Okay.
Or at least I didn't know about it. It was a secret from me.
It is kind of a secret writing group. I know they have a Facebook group, but there are a couple, like, even towns all around that will come and meet in Deer Lake. They have I can't remember the name of it right now, but I've talked to them before about stuff. They have a huge writing group out there, I know.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. We should send them copies of your book. So you've got a new book coming out in March called The Fifth Queen. Can you tell me anything about that?
So that book is kind of a continuation from The Sixth Elemental, although it takes place 16 years later, and it kind of explores the idea between, I guess you would say, people who have a destiny and whether they accept it or don't, and what comes of that.
Okay, now I'm not confused, but I want to clarify. So even though the first one says 6 in the title, and the second one says 5 takes place after 6.
It does, because...
How did you do with math?
Okay, I'm actually very smart at math. I did calculus in university as an elective. I was doing an arts degree.
Okay.
So I'm very good at math. I just thought it would be really fun to write something, or write a series that went from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1.
To -1.
Exactly, because, other people have done like A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So I started with 6, and I thought, why go up when you can go down?
That's fair. That's fair. What if you want to do more? Would you then have to do 7? What would happen there if you wanted to go beyond 6 books, say?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think that's a problem. That's a thing for future Allison to figure out.
I'm so happy. I think you're the only other person I know that refers to their future and past selves as, like, future Ali and past Ali. I do that all the time. Future Matt or past Matt.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it's kind of fun because, you think about the future, but it's also future Ali's problem. It's not present Ali's problem.
Who is your worst nemesis? Because my worst nemesis is past Matt. Why do I have a hangover right now? Past Matt.
Well, past Ali would be my nemesis because she's the one who's done the stuff. Future Ali is the person who hasn't done the stuff yet, so you don't know. She could change her mind and not do it. But past Ali already done it, so...
Future Ali is innocent and pure. Past Ali, less so.
Exactly.
Yep. Same.
But it's all just wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yes. Well, time is a circle also, so future Ali is past Ali.
Is she?
You got that from someone who's been on that show before. Beautiful. Okay, so if The Fifth Queen is a continuation of The Sixth Elemental, can you tell me, pretend I don't know anything about it, even though I've read and loved it, tell me about The Sixth Elemental.
Okay. So The Sixth Elemental is a story about a person who kind of thinks that they're unremarkable, and then what happens is on their 21st birthday, when they're supposed to get an element or not, they end up getting all 6 elements, which is supposed to be scientifically impossible, that nobody's ever done for 700 years, and even then, who knows that that person 700 years ago wasn't a myth or made up. So they get this power, but they don't think that they should have it, and they don't know what to do with it, and they feel that they need to prove that they can handle it, but they just don't know how. So it's kind of about coming to terms with, I guess, being the chosen one.
Okay. That's cool. I find chosen one narratives very interesting, but especially when they deal with what that means psychologically for the character who is quote-unquote chosen. Does it get into any of that stuff?
It does get into that, because I don't know for what reason, but I decided to have kind of 2 parallels running in this story. So there's the character and her normal life and how she feels and how the way she grew up and the people she grew up with, how that impacted the person she is now. And then there's a point where she, I don't know if this is spoilers, but she gets brainwashed and has a completely different history that is kind of propelling her forward. And so you get to see, I guess, kind of nurture versus nature.
I wonder, like, psychologically, like, a lot of... This is really weird and really kind of heady kind of stuff, but a lot of chosen one narratives tend to deal with the characters coming to terms with how what it means to be the chosen one. Like that's it tends to focus around that. And the most famous chosen one narrative of all time would come from the Bible.
I thought you were going to say Star Wars.
No, a lot of people have seen Star Wars, but I think the progenitor of this type of story would be the Bible. I have to wonder sometimes if all of the fiction that deals with, like, how people deal with being the chosen one kind of comes from the fact that we never see that in the Bible. Like, we skip those chapters. In the Bible, he goes from age, like, I think it's 13 to 30. Like, when he's 13, he finds out that he's the chosen one, and then it skips right to when he's 30 and starts on his mission. So we skip over him dealing with what it means to be the chosen one, and as a weird result, whenever we, as modern storytellers, do chosen one narratives, that's what we focus on.
And it's interesting because if you think of the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, they gave him a moment of doubt in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah. So, like, they, I guess, wrote in, I don't really know the Bible offhand, but they wrote in that moment where he's like, what am I doing? Do I need to do this? Like, that moment of doubt, they added it.
Yeah. Which I imagine was probably controversial at the time, or maybe still is, depending on... Anytime they do anything with that story, it becomes controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, my. Okay, so I'm hearing the 6 elemental stuff, and I can't help but think of the Golden Compass a little bit. So there's, in that one, it was you got this spirit animal once you came of age, if I'm remembering that correctly, because it's been a very long time since I read it. I saw the movie. It wasn't good.
Oh, the movie was terrible.
Oh, the worst. The worst.
So, it wasn't a spirit animal. It was called a daemon, and it was with them from birth. But when they were children, the animal changed around, and it could shift shapes and be different animals. But then when they hit puberty, it stayed one shape.
I knew it was something like that. Okay. So is it kind of like that where, like, in this world, from the start of your story, that's just commonplace? Like, when you hit a certain age, in your case 21, everyone gets a power? Is it everyone? Are there some people that get no powers?
There are people who get no powers. The way it works is I kind of created because I am a research nerd, I created sort of a 6-strand DNA segment, and then each strand kind of aligned itself to a power, so one of 6 elements. And your DNA to some degree is kind of shifting and changing until you come of age at 21. And then if one element is more out of balance than the others, that's the power you get. And if all your elements are aligned, then you get no power, which is why it's supposed to be impossible to get 6, because if your elements are aligned, you're supposed to be neutral and not have powers.
Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. So, you said like a DNA segment. Is that why the series as a whole is called the Segment Delta Archives?
Oh, no, it's not.
Oh.
It's called that because this is just some crazy backstory I came up with. But after the last World War, the Earth was mostly demolished, and so there was one area of land called the Center that was, big enough for people to kind of rebuild themselves, but then the population got too big and they started looking for other areas. So they started finding groups of islands and grouping them together into segments. And then there's a segment alpha, segment beta, and segment delta.
Cool.
Yeah, so segment delta archives are just stories in that segment.
Oh, cool. So there could someday be like a segment alpha archive.
There actually could. Maybe that's what'll happen when I hit 0. I'll just go to segment alpha and pick a random number.
Interesting. Let's start again. That is interesting. Okay. I am down for this. That's cool. All right.
It makes sense once you explain it.
Yes. Well, all things make sense once you've explained it. That's not true. Some things don't make sense even after you explain them.
That's true.
Yeah. Calculus doesn't make sense.
Oh no, calculus is fun.
No.
Come on.
I'm just being silly.
Solve for X, Matt. Solve for X.
Solve for X. Solve for X. Okay. Meaning of life equals X. Solve for X.
The meaning of life is 42.
X equals 42. Of course. Of course. Such nerd. Much wow.
Such nerd.
Okay, so in addition to being an author of some merit, you might be more known to our readers for your short story efforts. You've got 2 short stories coming up in the upcoming Dystopia from the Rock, which I believe also comes out in March. I say I believe because there's not a firm launch date for that yet. But that, so you've got 2 short stories coming out in there. One's called Untitled, and the other's called Authentic New Island Experience. Can you tell us about your short story writing process, or how that goes? You seem to pride yourself on being in all of the anthologies from Engine, at least.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I should just stick to a genre and, start to write that. But honestly, if I get a story idea, I want to chase it down. It doesn't matter what genre it is. If I have a good story to tell, then I want to tell it. So mostly I just kind of try to think about what the anthology is about, what the publisher is looking for, and then I try to think of, maybe other stories that have been written, and I try to think what would be a really interesting story to tell, or what's a point I haven't seen before, and then try to work it out from there.
Okay. Short stories seem to come very naturally to you. Like, you're a very gifted short story author. You're a gifted author in general, but I'm talking about the short fiction right now.
Thank you.
I find it difficult. I can muddle through a short story if I used to get assigned one for a class when I was in school or something like that. Usually, if I could, I would just have a self-contained scene from a novel. Like, if I needed to write a short story for class, I would write a short story that was actually a scene from a novel that happened to have a beginning, middle, and end, and eventually it saw print in the novel. I can only think of one short story that I ever, had an idea for and just had to write it, and it was only a couple days Genesis. It was, I have an idea, Oh, I'm thinking about it. Okay, yeah. And then I sat down and wrote it in like 4 hours, and then that's going to be in Dystopia. That's the one called Views. But other than that, I tend to be kind of... My well is dry when it comes to short fiction. Can you talk about your process at all? Because it's very interesting to me because you were prolific with it.
I guess one of the reasons I gravitate towards short stories is because I do have so many ideas just bouncing around in my head. So if it's an idea for a short story, then I can finish it, and then it's done, and then I can move on to the next thing. So when you're writing it, you want to make sure that you do have that beginning, middle, and an end. You want to know that you have your characters figured out, but I like that you can kind of distill things down to a moment. Because again, I do struggle with descriptions, so short stories mean I don't have to describe as much. I can sort of go into it and then just like get it done and get it finished.
Okay. That's true. I mean, I imagine if I could train myself to do short stories more, I would have that sense of satisfaction of finishing something more often than focusing on novels.
Yeah, because I've only finished like 4 novels in my entire lifetime, and the first one was, like, it took me months to finish because I just needed to get to the end. So with short stories, I can I can write a short story in a week, and then I can spend time editing on it, and I can just get it done and get it out there faster.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Speaking of short stories, or even shorter than your normal short stories, you were just announced the winner of the most recent Kitsora Flash Photography Fiction Contest. That's a mouthful of a contest to say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you are a prize-winning author, and they have blind judges for that. So I was one of the judges for it, but I had no idea that I was voting for you. What is the process of flash fiction like to you? What does it feel like to have finally won one? Because you submitted to a few. You mentioned in your post on we're in a genre writers group together that you'd like. I'd finally resigned myself to never winning the Kitsora contest. Today I won the Kitsora contest.
Yeah, it was kind of like always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Like, I, come in third a couple of times, which was really great. But essentially I was like, oh, there's so many great writers out there, and I'm just not hitting that point that I want. But I want to keep writing, and I want to keep finishing things. So I thought, well, let's just keep doing the Kitsora competitions and, think of new and interesting ways to write and use them as kind of writing exercises.
Yeah.
And make sure that I'm still doing something and still finishing something. And so I sent in 2 stories on the latest one, and one was more of a narrative, and then one was more, I don't know, I guess I'd say like slightly visceral.
Okay.
Why I'm not surprised you liked it.
Oh, the visceral one won?
Yeah, the visceral one won,
nice.
I think. So it was slightly more like just descriptive, which again is a thing I struggle with. So I worked real hard on that one. But I was just kind of like, it doesn't matter if I win. I just want to do this because I want to get stuff done, and I want to keep trying, and I want to keep getting my rejection letters and like build up a good pile. And I literally saw your email and went, ooh, I got my 2nd rejection today, and then opened it, and you said I'd won, and I didn't know what to do with myself.
That's awesome. I love that. I was actually really surprised. I didn't usually, like, sometimes when I'm reading those ones, because I'm usually one of the judges for the Kitsora contest, there's been a few months where I've been too busy, so I've handed it off to a guest judge or something like that. But I'm usually one of them. Usually we like to have 3. We like to have me representing Team Engine. We have someone from Team Kit, so that she's involved in it. Either herself or her photography partner. Or we'll sometimes try to have a third, a guest judge on. usually I can tell, even though I take great pains to strip all the names off it and remove any identifiers. Usually I can still go, oh, this is Allie's. Okay. Like, I always know what one's yours. I often know which one's Peter's. I try not to let it affect me, but it's like, okay, there we go. This is the first time I had no idea. I was shocked when I opened the master file that you had even submitted, because I didn't see any of your, let's say, fingerprints on any of them.
And ironically, that's the time I won.
Yes.
Actually, it's funny because it reminded me of, I used to write flash fiction about X-Men back in university. And there were a couple of things like I would goof around and I would do some funny stuff, and then I wrote like 2 really heartfelt ones, and I kind of stuck them in at the end of all the goofy ones, and then everyone was like, I was laughing, and then you just gutted me with the final one. So that really reminded me of those.
Okay. It is a little known fact that I have read every single issue of X-Men ever printed, even tangentially related to X-Men. I went and I looked up the chronological order. This is about 5 years ago, and not the order that it was published in, the chronological order. So if something took place before issue 1, I read that first, and I read the whole way up through, and literally read no other comics until that was done. I read novels and stuff like that, usually more heady novels to try and balance it out. But that was a good 3 years of my life. I know what I'll do. I'll immerse myself in X-Men for some reason, as though that's a badge of honor. But I have to now ask, we have to devolve into nerd talk for a second, and that's fine on this show.
Mm-hmm.
What was that X-Men fanfiction? What were you doing with that X-Men fanfiction?
It was on LiveJournal, which was kind of an earlier predecessor of Facebook. And it was just a group of people, and we would do X-Men drabbles, we called them. So we would post a prompt, and we would all write based on that prompt. So there was one that was, I think, like Treasured Memories or something, and I wrote one about Rogue's most treasured memory being a scar on her back, because it was the only thing she had left of Cody after she pretty much drained his life. So it was kind of like a move he made in like desperation, feeling the life drain from him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then there was another about...
you could tell we're both nerds because you didn't have to explain who Cody was.
No.
Yep. Anyway, continue.
The second one was about Wolverine and basically his claws and how it hurt every single time those claws came out. Yep. But it was just much more description and visceral.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I did a really hilarious thing that was based on Conan O'Brien and Andy Richter's Secrets segment that I did based on secrets around X-Men. So some of those were pretty funny. Okay. I'm actually really proud of some of them.
Okay. Do you have a favorite X-Men and a favorite era of X-Men?
I guess my favorite era would probably be the Fox series, the cartoon series that was on in the 90s, just because it was so fun and it boiled down a lot of stuff and it got the Dark Phoenix right, so that was great.
In a way that the movies would never will.
Oh, so much, yes.
Yep.
Although it looks like there's going to be spaceships in the Dark Phoenix movie, so I'm just wondering if they're going to pull the Shi'ar in.
Maybe. You never know. This is probably one of the last X-Men continuity movies before things get changed up with the buyout. So maybe they'll pull the trigger on it finally.
Yep. My favorite X-Men is Gambit.
That's one of mine too. Gambit and Rogue are tied, actually.
Gambit and Rogue are good. They're good, solid X-Men.
Yeah. My favorite era of the X-Men comics is right after X-Men the Animated Series came out, because in the 90s they were doing this thing where, they kind of, whatever was going on in those TV shows at the time, they tried to skew the comics so that it felt like it was a continuation of that. Mm-hmm. So, plot threads that were being discussed on Saturday morning were coming up, And so they were talking about, like, X-Men 350 was the first X-Men comic I ever bought, and it was the culmination of, like, Gambit's secrets and all like that. It was huge for me.
Yeah, I don't really buy, like, giant series of comics. I usually try to get, like, standalone books or, like, 10 issues in one, like, standalone story arcs.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, there's only so much shelf space I have.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, spacing is an issue. I'm loving Marvel Unlimited and the fact that I can just read all of it just like a Netflix account kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Have you ever traveled to write?
I have never traveled specifically to write. There was one time where I went to London and I knew I wanted to go to Paris for a day. So I knew that I could write on the Channel because I literally would have nothing else to do.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I just, honestly, I have a book with me everywhere I go, and I mostly try to travel by, like, buses or trains. I try not to drive myself, because then I have the chance to write while I'm traveling.
Makes sense. Okay. Okay, to get Semi back on track, although I don't care, we could talk about X-Men. I don't care. So what do you have planned for the future? Is there anything you're working on now?
Well, I'm working on a collection of short stories.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I mean, I've published quite a few through Engine.
Yep.
So that's wonderful. But I've also got a whole bunch of short stories that I've written that don't really have a home right now. So, it'd be kind of fun to give them a home. I'm also working on my next novel, is actually a continuation of Jacoby Street.
Which was written by a complete fool.
Which was written by, I don't know, some guy. He wrote it for spite, so, like, interesting.
I did write it for spite. Most of what I write is for spite.
Spite can be a powerful motivator.
Spite is the best.
So I don't have spite, unfortunately, to write this one. But I'm having a lot of fun with it because it takes place in a theater with theater people. It's called The Variety Show. And I'm very excited to hopefully do better than your book.
Oh, I am excited for that as well. So is it retaining some of the... I'm assuming because it's you, it's going to retain some of the focus on character and character development and strong characters and stuff like that from the previous book. Is it going to retain any of the horror elements, or is it skipping genre?
It is actually going to remain the same genre, so it is going to be horror, but it's going to be kind of a ghost story more, I guess.
Nice.
So I'm going to try to skew it towards ghosts. I still haven't decided if I have room for some of the characters from your story, but I'm definitely trying to keep the elements of the street itself and the characteristics of it so that it's a cohesive piece.
To me, the street was the main character.
Yeah, the street was a really good character. Like, I want to live on that street. It seems really interesting.
Except for the monsters.
Yeah, except for the monsters.
Yeah, except for the fact that we'd definitely be the first ones to die.
I don't know if I would, because I wouldn't go in an alley.
That's true. You wouldn't go in an alley.
I would not go down a dark alley or, like, pay attention to mysterious stuff.
You wouldn't go near an alley.
I mean, I'm always near an alley if that's where you're thinking.
Yeah. I'm thinking that you're an alley because your name is Allie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got dad jokes for days. Thank you for coming on, Allie.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
No problem. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to have you on again sometime. Maybe after the book comes out, we can chat about it, or once I've had a chance to read it, stuff like that. But as of right now, everyone, you should go check out The Sixth Elemental. It's available on Amazon and wherever great books are sold. But also coming up in March, please check out The Fifth Queen, which is a continuation of that series. Anything you'd like to say, Allie, before we sign off?
Just keep writing. I have no idea. I have no catchphrase. I should get a catchphrase.
I feel like your catchphrase just became, I should get a catchphrase.
Yeah, I want my catchphrase to be the house always wins, but I actually don't win that much.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.